Your perennials aren't dying from cold. They're dying from something called desiccation damage, and most gardeners have never even heard of it. I've been consulting with botanical gardens for 15 years, and what I'm about to share goes against almost everything you'll read in basic gardening books. These are the mistakes I see even experienced gardeners making, the kind that don't kill plants immediately but slowly weaken them until one bad winter finishes them off. Here's mistake number one, and it's counterintuitive. Most perennials don't freeze to death. They dehydrate to death. Winter desiccation is the leading cause of perennial failure, but almost nobody talks about it. Here's what's actually happening at the cellular level. When temperatures drop below 28 degrees Fahrenheit, ice crystals form in the soil. These crystals create a vapor pressure gradient that pulls moisture out of plant cells through a process called sublimation. The plant's roots can't absorb water from frozen soil, but the crown and any remaining foliage continue losing moisture to dry winter air. This is especially severe in zones 5 and colder with low snow cover. A University of Minnesota study found that perennials lose up to 40% of their cellular moisture during January and February in exposed locations. That's why plants that look fine in December are dead by March. The solution isn't what you think. Anti-desiccant sprays like wilt-proof can help, but the real trick is late-season foliar feeding with potassium silicate. Apply it 2 to 3 weeks before your first hard frost. Potassium strengthens cell walls, making them more resistant to ice crystal formation, while silica reduces transpiration rates by up to 30%. I use a 003 potassium silicate solution at 1 tablespoon per gallon, sprayed until runoff. This is standard practice in commercial perennial production, but home gardeners almost never do it. I started using this technique after losing 200 Baptisia plants in one winter. Haven't lost more than 5% since. Mistake number 2, destroying your mycorrhizal networks with late-season fungicide applications. Most gardeners don't realize that 80 to 90% of perennials depend on mycorrhizal fungi for winter survival. These fungal networks don't just help with nutrient uptake. They actually produce compounds called cryoprotectants that protect plant roots from freeze damage. When you spray broad-spectrum fungicides in fall to clean up disease problems, you're nuking these beneficial fungi along with the pathogens. The plant goes into winter without its fungal partners, and its cold tolerance drops by 5–10 degrees. Research from Michigan State shows that perennials with established mycorrhizae survive temperatures 7 to 9 degrees colder than the same species without fungal partners. That's the difference between a plant rated for Zone 5 surviving in Zone 4 or dying in Zone 6. If you need to control fungal disease in fall, use targeted fungicides that don't harm mycorrhizae. Copper-based products and sulfur are generally safe. Avoid anything with propiconazole, myclobutanil, or chlorothalonil after September. Better yet, inoculate your perennials with mycorrhizal fungi in late August. I use products with Glomus intraradices and Glomus massii species, about 1 teaspoon per gallon of water drenched around the root zone. It takes 4 to 6 weeks for the network to establish, which is why late August timing is critical. Mistake number 3. Not manipulating photoperiod signals to trigger proper dormancy. Plants don't just sense temperature, they sense day length. Perennials begin hardening off when days drop below 14 hours of light, triggering production of abscisic acid, ABA, the dormancy hormone. But here's what most people miss. Artificial light from houses, street lamps, or security lights can disrupt this signal. I've documented cases where Hemerocolis and hosta within 30 feet of outdoor lighting failed to properly harden off, even though identical plants 100 feet away survived fine. The artificial light extends their perceived photoperiod, delaying ABA production by 2 to 3 weeks. That means they're still metabolically active when the first hard frost hits. If you have perennials near outdoor lighting, you have 2 options. First, shield them with opaque barriers after sunset starting in mid-September. Second, use wavelength-specific lighting that doesn't trigger photoreceptors. LEDs below 500 nm blue spectrum have minimal impact on plant dormancy signals. This sounds extreme, but commercial growers manipulate photoperiod routinely. I started paying attention to this after a client lost an entire astilbe collection that was planted near motion sensor lights. Move them 40 feet away and suddenly they're thriving. Mistake number 4, allowing ethylene-producing debris to accumulate around crowns. This one's subtle. When leaves and plant material decompose, they release ethylene gas. In small amounts, this is fine, but when you pile thick layers of mulch directly over perennial crowns in fall, especially fresh, green material, you create an anaerobic decomposition zone that produces toxic levels of ethylene. Ethylene is a ripening hormone. In winter, it can trigger premature bud break during warm spells. Those buds then die when temperatures drop again, and the plant has exhausted its carbohydrate reserves, producing growth it didn't need. A Cornell University study found that perennials mulched with fresh grass clippings or green leaves had 34% higher mortality than those mulched with aged material. The difference was ethylene concentration at the crown level. Use only aged brown mulch materials for winter protection, shredded leaves that have sat for 6 to 8 weeks, or aged wood chips. And always leave that 3-inch gap around the crown. Not for air circulation like everyone says, but to prevent ethylene accumulation. If you must use fresh material, mix it with 30% biochar or zeolite. Both absorb ethylene and prevent it from concentrating around plant tissue. I keep a bag of biochar specifically for fall mulching, mixed at about 2 cups per wheelbarrow of shredded leaves. Mistake number 5, cutting back plants that are still actively photosynthesizing. Here's something most gardeners don't understand. Perennials store carbohydrates in their roots and crowns during fall. These reserves are what fuel spring growth. But many perennials continue photosynthesizing well after they look done for the season. Take sedum autumn joy. The flowers turn brown in October and everyone cuts them back. But the leaves are still green and photosynthesizing until hard frost. Every day those leaves are working, they're pumping sugars into the roots. Cut them early and you've reduced the plant's stored reserves by 20–30%. The same applies to ornamental grasses, Rudbeckia, Echinacea, and most late-season bloomers. If there's any green tissue visible, leave it alone. You're costing the plant energy reserves it needs for winter survival and spring emergence. Studies from the Chicago Botanic Garden show that perennials allowed to fully senesce naturally have 40% higher carbohydrate reserves than those cut back early. That translates directly to survival rates and vigor the following spring. I use a simple test. If I can still see green anywhere on the plant, even just at the base, I don't touch it until spring. The only exception is disease, where leaving infected tissue does more harm than the lost photosynthetic time. Mistake number 6. Not understanding that frost heaving is a soil structure problem, not a mulch problem. Everyone says mulch prevents heaving, but that's oversimplified. Heaving occurs when ice lenses form in the soil and literally push plants upward. This happens in soils with poor structure, typically high clay content with low organic matter. You can pile 12 inches of mulch on top, and if your soil structure is wrong, plants will still heave. The ice lenses are forming 4 to 8 inches below the surface where mulch has no effect. The real solution is fall soil amendment. In late September, I work compost into the top 3 inches of soil around perennials, not touching the crown, but in the root zone 6 inches out. This changes the soil's water-holding characteristics and reduces ice lens formation. The science, organic matter creates smaller, more numerous soil pores. Water in small pores freezes at lower temperatures than water in large pores. Colligative properties. So, amended soil freezes more uniformly without forming those destructive ice lenses. A Purdue study showed that soil with 5% organic matter by volume had 70% less heaving than soil with 2% organic matter, regardless of mulch depth. I've proven this in my own garden. Since I started fall soil amending, I haven't had a single plant heave in 8 years. Mistake number 7, creating anaerobic conditions that kill roots before spring. This is especially common with heavy mulching. When you pile 6 inches of mulch over perennials, then get heavy snow on top, You've created a sealed system. Roots still respire during winter. They need oxygen. Cut off that oxygen supply, and you get root death from anaerobic conditions, not freezing. The symptoms look like freeze damage in spring. Plants emerge weakly or not at all, roots are brown and mushy, but it's actually suffocation. Professional growers use what's called ventilated mulching. They mix perlite or coarse sand, 30% by volume, into their mulch to maintain air porosity. You can also use pine bark nuggets, which don't compact and maintain air spaces. I've experimented with different mulch types using oxygen sensors. Shredded hardwood mulch under snow drops to less than 5% oxygen concentration at root depth within 3 weeks. Mix it with 30% pine bark, and it stays above 12% all winter, enough for root survival. Another option, use coarse mulch materials on the bottom, pine bark, wood chips 2 to 3 inches in size, and finer material on top. The coarse layer maintains oxygen exchange while the fine layer provides temperature insulation. Mistake number 8, not confirming that plants have actually entered true dormancy before winter hits. This is advanced, but it matters. Just because a plant looks dormant doesn't mean it is. True dormancy requires biochemical changes, increased ABA levels, decreased gibberellin levels, and accumulation of cold protective proteins called dehydrates. Plants that haven't fully transitioned to dormancy are vulnerable to even moderate cold snaps. This happens most often after warm autumns where temperatures don't drop gradually. There's a simple field test. In late November, cut a small branch or stem from the plant and bring it inside. Place it in water in a warm, bright location. If buds start swelling within 7 to 10 days, the plant isn't fully dormant and needs protection. If nothing happens for 3 weeks, dormancy is established. For perennials where you can't easily take cuttings, observe the crown carefully. Fully dormant plants should have no visible green tissue, and the crown should feel firm but not actively growing. If you see any swelling or softness, dormancy isn't complete. When plants aren't fully dormant and cold weather is coming, use row covers or cloches to extend their hardening off period. Even an extra 10-14 days can make the difference between winter survival and loss. I learned this from a dendrology professor who used it for woody plants, but it works perfectly for herbaceous perennials. Since I started testing dormancy status, my survival rate on marginally hardy perennials has jumped from about 70% to over 90%. These 8 mistakes are what separate casual gardeners from professionals who consistently overwinter even challenging perennials. It's not about doing more work, it's about understanding plant physiology and working with the actual mechanisms of winter survival, not just following generic advice. If you want more advanced techniques like this, subscribe. I'm covering vernalization requirements and spring emergence timing next.